Welcome, dear literature enthusiasts, to another intimate conversation here on Frame Shift. I'm so glad you're joining me today, and if you find yourself moved by thoughtful dissections and layers of meaning, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more explorations that bridge the worlds of cinema and literature. Let me be clear from the outset, this isn't a conventional movie review. Rather, what we're embarking upon is a deeply intellectual, theoretical, and critical analysis tailored for those of you who come from a literature background. Our aim is education and insight, an invitation to look beyond surface narratives and uncover the philosophical undercurrents that make storytelling truly alive. I remember the first time I encountered this film. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that invites introspection and perhaps too many cups of tea. I was curled up in my favorite armchair, a worn copy of one of my childhood favorites resting on the side table, and I thought I was settling in for a light-hearted escape. What I discovered instead was a work that, beneath its delicate animation and charming melodies, held questions about duty, empathy, and the uneasy reconciliation between instinct and compassion. For someone who once found solace in the rhythmic cadences of prose, it felt as if a new chapter of narrative possibility had opened before me, one that spoke in images as eloquently as words. As I settled into that armchair, headphones smoothing the edges of background noise, I felt a quiet thrill. Perhaps you know that feeling, the anticipatory flutter when a story teases more than it promises, hinting at something profound. And so, let us begin our journey together, weaving through the visual tapestry of this cinematic fable, pausing to reflect on the brushstrokes that reveal deeper truths. Think of this as a fireside chat among friends who have lingered long over lines of poetry and paragraphs of novels, now turning our attention to a different kind of page, one painted with light and movement. From the first frames, there is an almost imperceptible tension that hums beneath the surface. I was struck by how the gentle contours of the protagonist's world belie something more complex lurking just beyond the edge of the screen. In literature, we often discuss the power of foreshadowing, the artful planting of seeds that will later blossom into revelation. Here, the animators and storytellers have woven hints into the landscape itself. A rustling underbrush that seems too calculated to be mere background, or the way a passing creature's silhouette lingers in your peripheral vision. These choices remind me of the subtle cues in a well-crafted novel, where a seemingly innocuous line can re-emerge with startling significance. One of the things I love about this piece is how it grapples with the concept of the other. Academically, we might frame that as the exploration of alterity, how an entity outside the community challenges norms, values, and identities. Personally, I've often been drawn to stories of outsiders, characters who press against the boundaries of accepted behavior, inviting us to question our own definitions of belonging. I recall a time in my teens when I, too, felt like an intruder in my own life, uncertain of where I fit among the cliques at school or the expectations at home. Watching the fragile dance between acceptance and alienation on screen, I couldn't help but feel seen. As the film unfolds, we follow a spirited community whose daily rhythms are appended by the appearance of a colossal, enigmatic creature. The narrative structure here mirrors the classic hero's journey, yet it refracts it through a lens of communal perspective. Rather than focusing solely on a single hero's transformation, we witness how an entire society reacts to the unknown. This collective viewpoint is reminiscent of chorus moments in Greek tragedy, where the group's emotional tides guide our own. I found myself contemplating how our interpretations of a narrative shift when the chorus is replaced by a chorus of voices, each with its own biases, fears, and hopes. The cinematography, too, deserves our attention. There is a sequence, brief yet indelible, where sunlight filters through a dense canopy, illuminating motes of dust that swirl like ethereal dancers. It made me think of passages in literature where the description of light serves as a metaphor for revelation or clarity. In that moment, the light feels almost sentient, guiding our gaze to the subtle transformations playing out on the characters' faces. It's an invitation to look closely, to appreciate the alchemy that happens when visual poetry intersects with narrative purpose. Yet, for all its visual allure, the heart of our story lies in the emotional terrain it traverses. At its core is a meditation on compassion, what it means to extend kindness to that which we do not understand, and the courage required to challenge ingrained prejudices. In my own life, I've witnessed how fear can warp perception, how a single misunderstanding can grow into a chasm between people. This film's portrayal of fear as an active force, one that whispers cautionary tales into communal ears, resonates deeply with me. It reminds me of the times I've had to unlearn the stories I told myself about others, replacing instinctive wariness with patient curiosity. there is also a subtle exploration of duty. Our characters are bound by roles, guardians, caretakers, scouts, and these responsibilities shape their identities. But as the narrative progresses, we see that duty is not a rigid blueprint. It is malleable, capable of being reinterpreted in the light of new truths. I was reminded of the lines from a poem I once read about how the weight of obligation can either anchor us or allow us to soar, depending on the grace with which we bear it. In this cinematic tale, duty becomes a dynamic force, one that challenges each character to redefine what it means to protect. And then, of course, there are the twists. Without giving too much away, there is a passage where the seemingly fearsome creature is revealed not as a destroyer, but as a being of profound vulnerability. This reversal carries the narrative breath across its chest, shifting our sympathies and compelling us to reconsider our judgments. It's a moment that echoes the great turnings in literature, the ones that make you gasp, that rearrange your understanding of the entire text. In that instant, I felt a familiar stirring, as if I were rereading the final chapters of a beloved novel and discovering a new layer of meaning I had overlooked on earlier trips. What follows is a delicate interplay between tension and release, much like the arc of a finely wrought poem. In fact, I often find that poetry's cadences can teach us much about pacing in film, the way a pause can magnify emotion, or a well-timed beat can heighten suspense. The film's editors seem to have taken this lesson to heart, crafting scenes where silence becomes just as powerful as melody, where the absence of sound allows the viewer's own thoughts to fill the void. This blend of sound and silence, movement and stillness, creates an emotional tapestry that feels both expansive and intensely personal. I think of a quiet afternoon spent leafing through old letters, each line echoing memories long faded. There is a nostalgia here that is not melancholic, but rather reflective, an invitation to honor the past while acknowledging the transformative power of the present. In my own journey as a storyteller, I've come to cherish such moments of reflection, where time seems to fold upon itself and every glance backward is illuminated by newfound insight. As we approach the culmination of our narrative, the film invites us to ponder what it truly means to forge connections across divides. We see characters who have built walls of caution and suspicion, learning instead to bridge those divides through empathy. It is a theme that runs through much of literature, the redemptive potential of understanding, the way shared stories can dissolve barriers. I've always believed that at the heart of every great story is a willingness to venture into the unknown, to ask questions rather than parrot received wisdom. This work embodies that spirit, offering us a lens through which to examine our own preconceptions. In closing this introduction, I want to extend an invitation. Let us keep our eyes open for the subtle motifs that ripple beneath the surface, for the moments of quiet revelation that unfold in the interplay of light and shadow. Let us honor the film's capacity to speak in hushed tones as eloquently as it does in grand gestures, and let us carry forward the questions it poses about fear, duty, and compassion. Our exploration has only just begun, and I can't wait to delve deeper with you into the layers of meaning waiting to be uncovered. Thank you, friends, for embarking on this journey with me. Stay with me as we navigate the emotional landscapes ahead, rediscovering the power of story in every frame. If you've ever felt that a film can be as rich and textured as the finest novel, then you're in the right place. Let's continue together with open hearts and curious minds. I remember stepping into that world again, as if it were a hidden alcove in my own memory, a place brimming with the fragile light of dawn and the promise of undiscovered wonders. The story opens on a morning that feels both familiar and tinged with quiet anticipation. Dew clings to emerald leaves, and the air hums with the collective breath of a thriving community. We find our circle of fairies going about their duties, delicate hands weaving silk threads, nimble feet dancing among petals. But even in this serene routine there lingers a sense that something extraordinary is stirring just beyond the edge of sight. In those earliest moments, I felt a kinship with the characters, reverence for the natural world. It reminded me of childhood mornings spent tiptoeing through fog-draped gardens, listening to secrets carried by the wind. There's a gentle tension in these opening scenes, as if the forest itself is holding its breath, poised to reveal a truth that will ripple through every life touched by its reach. As the sun's rays deepen and the canopy shifts from shadow to gold, our focus settles on a group of friends, each defined by their craft, each bound by shared history. Among them, a certain tinkerer stands out. Her curiosity is palpable, her hands restless with the urge to invent, to improve, to reshape the familiar. I've always felt drawn to those characters who refuse to accept the world as it is, who challenge the boundaries of possibility. They mirror a part of me that grows restless with comfort and craves exploration. Alongside her is a nature fairy whose affinity for creatures speaks of a gentleness that can be mistaken for fragility. I once envied that kind of empathy, the ability to feel the heartbeat of every living thing as if it were your own. Watching her navigate her responsibilities, I sensed the first stirrings of a bond that would soon become the story's emotional core. Before long, a ripple of concern threads its way through the community. Scouts report strange disturbances, trees uprooted in a pattern that defies explanation, footprints too large to match any known creature, and a hushed apprehension that courses through every conversation. The atmosphere shifts. What began as a bright morning turns more somber, shaded by uncertainty. I recall the way my chest tightened in that moment, as though I too could sense an unseen presence watching from the undergrowth. It is here that the narrative begins to pulse with a primal rhythm, reminding us that at the heart of every idyll lies the potential for upheaval, that beauty can mask a deeper mystery waiting to unfold. The council convenes beneath towering ferns, their deliberations punctuated by the soft crackle of leaves and the distant call of birds. I loved how the film doesn't rush this gathering. Instead, it lingers on the faces of each leader, capturing flickers of doubt and determination in equal measure. Through their dialogues, we glimpse the weight of responsibility. To protect the valley, to preserve balance, and to confront whatever force encroaches upon their home. It resonated with me because leadership, I have learned, is never easy. It demands courage tempered by compassion, and wisdom often garnered through mistakes. In those moments, I felt an echo of my own failed attempts to guide projects or friendships, where good intentions collided with unforeseen consequences. Meanwhile, our two heroines set out to investigate the fringes of the forest, their footsteps silent on moss-carpeted ground. I remember my heart fluttering as if I were right beside them, drawn into shafts of light that pierced the leafy gloom. Their camaraderie shines through, teasing remarks shared in hushed tones, the occasional exasperated sigh when plans go awry, and the comforting reassurance that they face the unknown together. It brought to mind long walks with close friends, where every bend in the path held a new story, every rustle a potential surprise. There is something deeply human in those exchanges, a reminder that no matter how fantastical the setting, it is our shared bonds that anchor us. Their investigation leads them to a clearing rarely seen by fairy eyes, a place where the trees stand ancient and silent, and the air feels thick with history. Here, they discover the first signs of the enormous being at the center of our tale. Twisted vines forming shapes that suggest a colossal ribcage, and fur matted with moss as if it has lain in hibernation for centuries. The revelation is both awe-inspiring and unsettling. It challenges the fairies' beliefs about the boundaries of their world. I was struck by how this moment mirrors the disorientation we feel when confronting truths that shatter our assumptions. I've known that shock too, when a cherished idea collapses under the weight of new evidence, leaving me scrambling to reconstruct my understanding of what I thought was immutable. Back in the valley, word of the discovery spreads like wildfire. Some respond with excitement, dreaming of the marvels that might lie ahead, while others recoil in fear, convinced that this creature heralds disaster. The film deftly captures the ripple effect of rumor and uncertainty, weaving a tapestry of reactions that feels remarkably authentic. I found myself reflecting on the rumors that once swept through my own circles, the way fear can contort facts and drive people apart. There is a tenderness in the way the story treats those who balk at change. It doesn't mock their trepidation, but acknowledges the pain of watching one's world trembling at the edges. Tensions escalate when a team is formed to gather more information, equipped with rudimentary tools and cautious optimism. I loved the sense of purpose that suffused those preparations, the hum of collective resolve as fairies polished lanterns and tested contraptions. Yet there is also an undercurrent of doubt, visible in the trembling fingers of the youngest scout or the hesitant glances exchanged by seasoned veterans. It called to mind the moments before any great undertaking, when hope and fear exist in uneasy balance, each amplifying the other. In my life, stepping into the unknown has always carried that duality. A thrilling spark entwined with the nagging whisper, what if this goes awry? Their expedition into the deeper woods unfolds like a slow waltz with destiny. The scenery shifts from sunlit groves to shadowed hollows, and each new terrain brings fresh discoveries. A fallen log that serves as a bridge across a chasm, flowers that glow faintly in the moonlight, and the distant rumble of what might be the creature's breath. I felt my pulse quicken during these scenes, as if I were traversing that landscape myself, root and branch revelations stirring a yearning for both adventure and understanding. The filmmakers sprinkle in moments of levity too, a fairy slipping on slick stones, the mischievous chirp of a nearby critter, or the soft banter that reminds us friendship can endure even in the most treacherous circumstances. Then comes the first close encounter, a flash of movement so swift that our explorers barely have time to react. The earth trembles beneath their feet, and the forest seems to exhale a sigh of portent. In that heartbeat, they glimpse a silhouette so vast it blots out the sky, a shape that ignites awe and terror in equal measure. I remember gripping the edge of my seat, breath caught in my throat, as I witnessed their terror mirror my own. It is a masterful stroke, to make us feel the primal surge of adrenaline that courses through our veins when confronted by something far greater than ourselves. In the wake of that encounter, the team retreats to regroup. Emotions run high. Questions volleyed like sparks, accusations lingering in the air, and a shared sense of vulnerability that neither can dismiss nor deny. The forest, once a sanctuary of beauty, now feels indifferent to their presence, its ancient rhythms continuing unabated. I was moved by the way the narrative doesn't fall back on easy resolutions. Instead, it dwells on the messiness of fear and the complexity of forging consensus. It reminded me of heated debates I've witnessed among colleagues or friends, where the drive to understand clashes with the instinct to protect what we hold dear. As dawn breaks on the following day, the valley's atmosphere has shifted irrevocably. Preparations accelerate for a more comprehensive mission, reconnaissance teams charting new routes, healers readying supplies, and strategists convening once more to weigh risk against reward. Each scene pulses with an urgency that I found exhilarating, as though the very heartbeat of the community had quickened. Yet, even amid the bustle, there are quiet moments of reflection. A fairy pausing to listen to a bird's song, another tracing the pattern of leaves with furrowed brow. These interludes are vital, for they remind us that courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to pause, to listen, and then to act. Meanwhile, our tinkerer returns to her workshop, driven by a restless need to understand. Surrounded by sketches and prototypes, she dissects every detail of the creature's aftermath. The depth of its footprints, the texture of the displaced earth, the peculiar residue clinging to nearby branches. Watching her at work, I felt a kinship with her analytical fervor, how utterly engrossing it can be to unravel a mystery layer by layer. I recognize that spark in myself when I delve into a complex text, parsing each sentence for hidden meaning, chasing down every subtle clue that might illuminate the whole. Amid these parallel threads, the nature fairy embarks on her own investigation, guided by intuition rather than instruments. She follows subtle signs, a shift in wind patterns, the scent of unfamiliar pheromones, the resonant echo of a distant cry. Her approach feels almost poetic, as though she converses with the forest in a language of gestures and whispers. I found this duality, analysis and empathy, deeply compelling, a reminder that understanding often demands both intellect and heart. It reflects my own process of grappling with complex ideas. I alternate between cerebral scrutiny and moments of visceral connection, each informing the other in a delicate dance. Together, their findings begin to coalesce into a clearer picture. This is no mindless beast of legend, but a creature whose existence is bound by a rhythm as natural as the tides. Yet its size and strength render it a paradox, capable of destruction, even as it navigates the world with unassuming grace. The film teases these revelations with the subtlety of a whisper, refusing to spell out every implication too soon. I appreciated that restraint. It felt akin to reading a novel that trusts its reader to draw connections, to feel the tension between what is shown and what is left to the imagination. At the turning point of this section, the community readies a more daring plan, not to vanquish or imprison the creature, but to observe and perhaps communicate. This decision marks a departure from fear-driven instinct toward a more enlightened approach, a willingness to meet the unknown on its own terms. Watching the fairies prepare, I felt a rush of hope. It reminded me of the moments in my own life when I chose curiosity over trepidation, when I allowed a new perspective to challenge my assumptions. Those choices often carry risk, but they also open doors to understanding that fear alone can never unlock. As they venture forth once more, the air thrums with expectation. Lanterns bob in rhythmic procession, tools glint in the pale light, and the forest seems to lean in, as if eager to reveal its secrets. In that moment, I was swept up by the sheer beauty of collaboration. Individuals united by respect and shared purpose, guided by both head and heart. It felt like the apex of the first half, a point where the seed of conflict has sprouted into a quest that promises not only discovery but transformation. And so, as they step into the unknown once more, I find myself leaning forward, breathless with anticipation. The path ahead is shrouded in shadow, yet every flicker of light hints at truths waiting to be uncovered. It is a reminder that stories, like life, are seldom neat or predictable. They unfold in layers, each scene a brushstroke adding depth and color, each character's choice rippling outward in unforeseen ways. I can't wait to see how these early decisions echo through the rest of their journey, and I hope you feel that same stir of curiosity pulsing through your veins. Let us carry this sense of wonder forward, trusting that the next chapters will reveal even greater wonders and richer insights, as our tale continues to weave its tapestry of mystery and meaning. Tinker Bell and the Legend of the NeverBeast unfolds anew as we enter the heart of its story, where the earlier whispers of mystery give way to a crescendo of emotion and revelation. In the hush that follows our expedition's bold step into uncharted territory, the forest seems to exhale, as if granting permission for truths long buried to surface. I remember leaning forward when I first witnessed this passage, caught by the delicate balance between danger and empathy that drapes itself over every frame. The sunlight filtering through ancient branches now takes on a golden urgency, illuminating not only the towering figure of the NeverBeast, but also the swelling tides of conscience stirring within our small band of explorers. As the creature, later known to many simply as Gruff, reveals its gentle side, a shift occurs in the valley's collective heart. Word spreads like an ember igniting dry grass. The beast's intent is not to ravage but to protect. I recall the collective gasp I felt in the theater when Gruff tenderly tended to an injured firefly, its massive paw cradling the tiny winged traveler as though handling the most precious of relics. That juxtaposition of size and sensitivity struck me deeply, reminding me of moments in my own life when I discovered that strength can wear the guise of softness, and that the fiercest guardians are sometimes those least expected. Despite these tender moments, fear remains a potent current beneath the surface. The valley's leaders, wary of the creature's capacity for destruction, convene once again beneath the watchful canopy. I found this council scene profoundly human. Accusations ricocheted between hope and doubt, each fairy's voice carrying the weight of personal history. I felt a pang of recognition, recalling heated conversations I've had where fear of the unknown clashed with the call of understanding. There was a particular hush when our tinkerer rose to defend Gruff, her eyes shining with conviction. In that moment, I sensed a quiet revolution, one that dared to ask whether compassion might triumph over the hard shell of suspicion. Meanwhile, two scouts slip away under the cover of twilight, determined to observe Gruff's behavior from a distance. Their hearts pound with a mix of dread and fascination as they trail the creature's gigantic footprints, which curve gently around groves of saplings rather than trampling them. That discovery felt like uncovering a hidden stanza in a beloved poem, an unexpected rhyme that reshapes the entire verse. I remember today when I first realized that my own footsteps, once careless in unfamiliar surroundings, could become acts of reverence when guided by respect. Witnessing these scouts' wonder, I was reminded that empathy often emerges not from grand gestures but from the choice to tread lightly. As night deepens, the forest takes on an otherworldly glow. Bioluminescent fungi cast a soft luminescence, and fireflies swirl like living stars. It is here that Gruff's true nature emerges most vividly. He lifts massive stones to reveal starbursts of luminescence below, carefully avoiding crushing the delicate organisms he nurtures. I felt my own breath catch as the scene unfolded, moved by the realization that care can transcend boundaries of scale. In literature, we speak of perspective shifts, moments when we are invited to see the world through another's eyes. This sequence embodied that idea with cinematic grace, coaxing us to broaden our own empathetic horizons. Back at the valley, division grows. A faction argues for preemptive action, citing past legends of beasts turning on those who welcomed them. Another pleads for patience, recalling Gruff's gentle gestures. I was struck by how the filmmakers portrayed both sides with empathy. They neither romanticize faith nor vilify caution. It reminded me of debates I've witnessed in academic circles, where zeal for discovery collides with the imperative to safeguard what we hold dear. Those debates often carry no easy answers, and here the narrative honors that ambiguity, allowing each character's fear and hope to ring true. Amid this turmoil, our tinkerer returns to her workshop, feverishly sketching observations and refining contraptions meant to communicate with Gruff. I smiled when I saw her transform trembling notes into delicate drawings, a testament to the power of art in translating emotion into understanding. It echoed my own practice of scribbling thoughts in a notebook, finding clarity not in abstract theorizing, but in the tactile brush of pen on paper. Her workshop becomes a crucible of creativity and vulnerability, where every failed earpiece invention and every smudged charcoal line carries the weight of her convictions. Meanwhile, the nature fairy ventures deeper into the terrain Gruff calls home, seeking to decipher the creature's motivations. She traces a path to a hidden grotto, where faint echoes of a lullaby-like sound weave through the air. That melody, haunting and tender, seems to emanate from the very rocks themselves, as if the forest remembers a song it once sang. I felt tears prick my eyes the first time I heard this passage, struck by the idea that memory can be embedded in the landscape, waiting for someone with open ears to awaken it. It reminded me of old family homes, where floors creak with stories and walls seem eager to whisper long-forgotten secrets. Then arrives the moment of greatest peril. A tremor, sudden and violent, shakes the forest floor, splitting trees and sending our fairies scrambling. Gruff's silhouette looms through the chaos, but instead of panicking, he moves with purpose, herding frightened creatures to safety and bracing ancient oaks against the tremor's worst force. Watching this sequence, I was overwhelmed by the potency of selfless action. It brought to mind times when I witnessed unexpected bravery in ordinary people, a neighbor shielding a stranger during a storm, a friend offering solace in a moment of despair. These acts, though small in scope, reveal the vast reservoirs of courage within us all. The tremor subsides, and the valley's defenses lie in disarray. Trees are downed, nests destroyed, and a tremor of fear runs deeper than any before. It is then that the valley's council realizes the truth. The disturbance was not Gruff's doing, but a subterranean quake threatening to unravel the very foundation of their world. I felt my heart lurch at that revelation, as though the rug had been pulled from beneath every assumption we had clung to. It reminded me of times when I discovered that the true cause of a problem lay hidden beneath layers of misinterpretation, moments when excavating the root truth demanded humility and perseverance. In response, the fairies mobilize alongside Gruff. He guides them to a cavernous fissure at the forest's core, where steaming vents spew ash and shifting boulders threaten to collapse entire groves. Working in tandem, the smaller fairies use their skills, tinkering, nurturing, scouting, to stabilize the tremor's fault lines, weaving vines into living braces and fastening stones with silk. Gruff, with his colossal strength, lifts boulders and plugs vents with massive leaves. The synergy of their efforts felt like a metaphor for harmony between different forms of knowledge. Science and instinct, craft and compassion joining forces to confront a challenge. Too immense for either alone. I thought of collaborative research projects I'd been part of, where interdisciplinary teams combined expertise to yield breakthroughs none could achieve alone. As sweat and dust mingle in the cavern's dim light, the fairies falter under exhaustion. The weight of the rockfall proves too great, and more tremors threaten to bury them. In that moment of crisis, our tinkerer sacrifices her tether to secure a critical boulder, plunging into the darkness behind it. I held my breath, recalling times I watched colleagues risk everything for a shared goal, uncertain whether they would return unscathed. Gruff, sensing her absence, nudges aside debris and searches the tunnel with urgent determination. His roaring bellows reverberate like a plea for unity, reminding us that bond forged in crisis can transcend speech. When he finds her, trapped yet alive, a wave of relief washes over the entire cavern. Gruff carefully lifts the fallen stones and cradles our tinkerer, carrying her back to the cavern's mouth as fairies gather to cheer. That triumphant moment broke something open inside me. A recognition that compassion and solidarity have the power to rewrite the course of disaster. I remembered protests where strangers joined hands to resist injustice, and it occurred to me that these scenes, though rendered in animation, carry the same spark of collective hope that drives real-world change. With the crisis contained, dawn breaks once more on a forest forever altered. Trees stand straighter, vines bloom brighter, and the earth seems to hum with renewed vitality. The valley's leaders convene in gratitude, acknowledging that Gruff's presence was a gift rather than a threat. I felt tears well up at the sight of previously skeptical faces offering garlands of flowers to the creature, their gestures a testament to transformation born of understanding. It reminded me of reconciliation ceremonies I had witnessed, where forgiveness unfurled like a blossoming flower in spaces long barren. In the aftermath, Gruff retreats to the realm he had long called home, his massive form blending into the ancient groves as if he were a living part of the landscape. Our heroes, Tinker and Nature Fairy, stand at the threshold, their hands clasped in shared satisfaction. They exchange silent smiles, bonds deepened by adversity and wonder. That quiet farewell resonated with me as powerfully as any grand declaration. Sometimes the most profound moments pass in hushed exchanges, spoken in the language of shared glances. As the valley returns to its routines, the fairies incorporate lessons learned from Gruff's visit, greater respect for the unknown, deeper trust in one another's judgment, and a recognition that fear need not be the final arbiter of action. I thought of chapters I've closed in my own life, where friendships were tested and emerged more resilient, or where a leap of faith led to unexpected growth. These echoes affirmed that the film's resolution, though framed in the realm of fantasy, carries truths that reach into our everyday worlds. In the final flicker of light before the screen fades, a single firefly alights on a moss-covered pawprint, flickering in a silent salute to a friendship that transcended boundaries of size and species. I sat in the theater, heart full, as that image lingered, an emblem of hope that unfolds in the spaces between fear and understanding. It reminded me of the stories I cherish most, where the most enduring magic arises not from spells or incantations, but from the simple courage to reach out, to listen, and to embrace the stranger in our midst. And so, dear friends, our journey through this tale draws to a close, yet its reverberations continue to echo in the pathways of our hearts. We have witnessed how empathy can bridge chasms, how collaboration can tame calamity, and how even the mightiest among us can harbor the gentlest of souls. As we step back into our own lives, may we carry with us the lesson that every giant mystery contains a spark of tenderness, waiting for those brave enough to kindle it. The story may end here, but its spirit travels with us, a reminder that in each of us lies the power to transform fear into fellowship and to find wonder where we least expect it. I've always believed that the truest measure of a story's power lies not only in the landscapes it paints, but in the souls it brings into focus. And here, among these fluttering wings and whispering trees, the characters emerge as living testaments to the beauty of transformation. At the center stands the Tinkerer, her name sung by gears and dreams, a soul shaped by the spark of invention and the restless call of possibility. From the first glimpse of her in the workshop, I felt the electricity of her mind. Eyes alight with ideas, fingers stained by oil, breath caught between hesitation and exhilaration. She reminds me of nights spent hunched over notebooks, chasing a single concept until dawn's first light. In her, I recognize the delicious ache of creation, the urgent need to bridge the gap between imagination and reality. Yet beneath that fervor, there is vulnerability. The fear that an idea might crumble beneath scrutiny or that change, once unleashed, could break the delicate bonds she holds dear. Beside her, the nature fairy moves with a grace that seems woven from the rustle of leaves and the soothing chorus of brook and breeze. I've known people whose presence feels like a balm, and she embodies that rare gift, the capacity to sense a creature's heartbeat or to decipher the secret language of petals unfolding. Watching her cradle a wounded bird or hum a lullaby to restless seedlings, I felt transported back to childhood afternoons spent cradling hamsters in my lap, longing to ease every small creature's pain. Her empathy is a gift and a burden, for she feels the forest's every sigh and tremor as if they were her own. In her gentle eyes, I saw reflections of my own yearning for connection, a reminder that kindness, like fragrance, lingers long after the flower has faded. Then there is Gruff, the great NeverBeast, whose silhouette looms as both enigma and mirror. At first, he embodies our collective fear of the unknown, an unknowable force stirring primal instincts of flight or fight. Yet as the story unfolds, his massive frame reveals tenderness, so profound it takes the breath away, the way he shields fledglings from sleet, or the quiet rumble of his purr that shakes dew from branches. In literature, we speak of the sublime, those moments when beauty and terror entwine so seamlessly that the heart trembles in equal parts awe and trepidation. Gruff is the living illustration of that paradox. When I first saw him brush away a fallen twig to uncover a nest, I felt tears sting my eyes, remembering times when strangers' gentle deeds shattered my own walls of suspicion. Around these three, a constellation of personalities spins its own stories. There is the sharp-tongued scout, whose confidence flickers at the cost of compassion, and whose arc taught me that pride, like steel, can be forged into a bridge rather than a barrier. I think of colleagues who bristle at the thought of vulnerability, only to discover that asking for help unlocks doors they never dared knock upon. Then there is the motherly figure, a healer whose patience feels as timeless as the forest itself. In her calm presence, I found echoes of mentors who guided me through tangled passages of doubt, offering solace without judgment. She reminds us that wisdom is less about knowing every answer and more about offering a hand when darkness shrouds another's path. Even the smallest characters carry weight. A mischievous pixie whose light-hearted pranks mask a heart yearning to be taken seriously. A scholarly fairy whose meticulous notes become a lifeline in moments of crisis. A silent guardian whose fierce loyalty shines brightest in the shadows. Each one taught me that no soul is too slight to shape the world, that even the quietest voice can ripple outward, stirring currents of change. In them, I remembered late nights spent wrestling with my own insecurities, and how a friend's simple nod of belief could fan the tiniest ember of confidence into a roaring flame. What strikes me most about these characters is their capacity for growth, not as a grand spectacle, but as something intimate and self-revealing. The tinkerer learns that invention without empathy can falter as easily as ideas without grounding. I thought of projects I once championed, blind to the needs of those they affected, and how humility became the blueprint for truer innovation. The nature fairy discovers that empathy must sometimes be tempered with courage, that to protect one life, she may need to step into the line of fire herself. I recalled moments when I hesitated to speak up, fearing to upset those I cared for, and how finding my voice freed truths I once kept locked away. Gruff's journey is perhaps the most poignant. From feared outsider to honored guardian, he embodies the promise of redemption and the risk inherent in trust. His silent perseverance, the way he endures misunderstanding until he can prove his heart, reminded me of friendships tested by rumor and time. I've watched as walls eroded through persistence, and how forgiveness can echo louder than any accusation. In him, I saw not only a beast of legend, but a reflection of every soul ostracized until someone bothered to ask, "Who are you beneath the roar?" Their relationships weave an intricate tapestry of interdependence. The tinkerer's bold plans find balance through the nature fairy's gentle guidance, and together they form a bridge between Gruff's world and the valley's fears. This triad reminded me of collaborations where disparate talents converge into something greater, a symphony where each instrument matters. I thought back to a research team I once joined, where scientists, artists, and community members had to learn each other's languages before co-creating solutions. The harmony they found resonates with the story's most vital truth, that unity is not the absence of difference, but the embrace of it. Secondary characters mirror these themes in microcosm. The one scornful scout who learns that curiosity can outshine cynicism, the healer who confronts her own fear in service of those she loves, the scholar who abandons dusty tomes to witness the world he studied in trembling reality. Their side arcs felt like beloved footnotes in the margins of my own life's narrative, small epiphanies that, when stitched together, form the very fabric of understanding. I remembered the classmates who surprised me with their quiet bravery, or the relatives who defied my expectations through simple acts of generosity. In observing how each character confronts their misconceptions, the film offers a masterclass in empathy's alchemy. It shows that to change someone's heart, we must first acknowledge our own. The tinkerer's pride fractures when Gruff's kindness challenges her assumptions, and her eventual willingness to listen clarifies that invention's greatest power lies in service. I saw parallels to my own turning points, when research findings shattered cherished theories, and I had to rebuild my perspective from the ground up. The nature fairy's transformation taught me that compassion, like a muscle, grows stronger through use. As she steps beyond comfort to protect Gruff, she learns that sacrifice is not a loss but an offering, deepening her connection to all living things. I recalled volunteering in community gardens, where early awkwardness gave way to a profound sense of belonging, and how those moments, though small, grounded me in purpose beyond myself. Gruff, through his gentle heroism, shows that identity is neither fixed nor simple. His dual capacity for devastation and protection challenges the fairies, and us, to look beyond labels. I remembered times when I clung to first impressions, only to discover richness hidden beneath unexpected surfaces. In my own life, this lesson unveiled friendships and ideas I might have otherwise discarded. Their collective journey underscores the film's thematic heart, the possibility of unity through understanding. But it's not a naive message. The story honors fear's legitimacy, portraying cautious souls whose doubts fuel healthy debate. In doing so, it reflects real-world conversations I've witnessed, where skepticism and hope can coexist, each tempering the other. I thought of discussions, academic and personal, where the most fruitful paths emerged not from blind consensus, but from respectful collision of perspectives. The film's quieter moments reveal character depths as effectively as its grandest scenes. A glance shared between two fairies as the forest hushes, or a solitary breath Gruff draws when no one watches, carry worlds of unspoken longing. In those pauses, I felt the power of silence to speak volumes, a reminder from my own writing that what remains unsaid can burn brightest in the reader's mind. Those pregnant silences taught me to listen between the lines, to trust that inner voids often echo truths our words cannot contain. Symbolism threads through each character's arc with graceful subtlety. The tinkerer's broken prototype, mended to serve a new purpose, becomes a metaphor for resilience, and the nature fairy's garland of wildflowers, once decorative, transforms into a protective wreath. I saw in these moments echoes of rituals I've woven into my life, turning broken pottery into mosaic art, or braiding flowers into crowns as a gesture of remembrance. These little acts of creation and recreation remind us that meaning is often born from what we rescue, not just what we build anew. Even secondary figures, like the watchful sentinel perched atop a fern or the scholar leafing through ancient scrolls, carry thematic weight. Their quiet dedication celebrates the unsung guardians of every community, those who labor unseen, whose contributions ripple outward in ways we may never fully grasp. I thought of janitors who keep schools safe, or librarians who preserve the keys to knowledge, and felt gratitude for their often overlooked heroism. By the story's end, each character stands irrevocably changed. The tinkerer tempered by compassion, the nature fairy fortified by courage, and Gruff affirmed as both legend and friend. Their collective transformation resonated in me long after the final frame, a vivid reminder that stories, at their best, do more than entertain. They show us mirrors in which we recognize our own potential for growth and grace. I recalled journaling after pivotal events in my own life, where reflection turned moments of despair into beacons for future paths. In sum, the film's character tapestry unfolds as a testament to empathy's alchemy, how understanding can transmute fear into fellowship, and how collaboration can yield miracles beyond the sum of its parts. Each soul, whether bearing wings or woven from bark and leaf, teaches that courage wears many faces, and that kindness can bloom even in the shadow of uncertainty. As I lingered on these characters' journeys, I carried away the conviction that our own friendships, projects, and inner battles are part of the same grand narrative. A story of transformation written in the language of hope, curiosity, and shared humanity. I've always been captivated by the hidden undercurrents that swirl beneath a film's polished surface, those curious anecdotes and uncanny serendipities that slip through the cracks of the official press kits. When I first dove into the making of this particular animated fable, I found myself awash in a tide of delightful oddities, tales that felt more like whispered legends than studio lore. They began with the earliest whispers on the story floor, where writers gathered in a cramped conference room scented faintly of coffee and old paper. Rumor has it that the original concept sketches for the NeverBeast sprang from a fevered dream one of the writers had after binge-watching nature documentaries and sipping too many herbal teas. In that dream, the creature's silhouette melded the broad shoulders of a grizzly bear with the sleek muzzle of a platypus, and for weeks, no one knew whether to laugh or insist the entire project be shelved. But inspiration, as it often does, arrived in the most unassuming guise, a lone platypus waddling through the story reels, its webbed feet leaving playful imprints in the tinted storyboard margins. It seemed as though nature itself had staged a cameo audition, reminding the team that sometimes the most fantastical ideas emerge from the most mundane observations. From that point forward, the production took on an almost mythic quality. Animators recount how, during late-night pushes to refine the NeverBeast's fur texture, they would consult an unlikely advisor, a visiting field biologist who had brought with him a sample of a baby beaver pelt. He insisted that the only way to capture the creature's unique tactile presence was to run one's fingers through real fur and note how light refracted along individual hairs. The animators, ever dedicated, built a small terrarium in a corner of the art department, complete with a heat lamp and carefully rationed leaves, simply so they could study the fur's behavior under changing light conditions. I've read that some folks still swear they can hear the faint rustle of leaves in that makeshift studio menagerie, as if the forest itself decided to take up residence among the drafting tables. Voice recording sessions yielded their own treasure trove of anecdotes. The actor who voiced the nature fairy, known for her ethereal, hushed tones, confessed in an interview that she preferred to record her lines in an actual treehouse she'd built in her backyard, a wooden sanctuary she called her whispering canopy. She claimed that the gentle sway of the boards and the filtered sunlight helped her slip into the character's attunement with nature. Engineers initially scoffed at the idea, worried about creaking floorboards and wind noise, but after testing the recordings, they agreed the organic resonance couldn't be replicated in any studio booth. One evening, they even captured an owl hooting in the distance, a sound so perfectly in tune with the fairy's dialogue that it was woven into the final mix. I love to imagine that the forest, through that owl, lent its own voice to the tale, an unplanned duet between wild and animated worlds. Equally enchanting were the composer's methods. Rather than confining himself to a conventional orchestral palette, he spent days experimenting with glass bottles of varying sizes, filling them to different levels with water to create haunting, bell-like tones. The team built a small alcove in the scoring stage, where clusters of bottles hung from wires like crystalline chimes. Musicians would gently run mallets along their rims, coaxing out melodies that shimmered with an otherworldly dewiness. Those sounds, layered beneath the sweeping strings and pastoral woodwinds, lent the soundtrack a sense of dew-laden mystery. Rumor has it that when the final mix played back in a near-empty theater, a handful of stray raindrops tapped against the marquee in perfect rhythm, as though the heavens themselves applauded the score's delicate magic. The engineering of the forest environments brought its own share of delightful detours. The color palette, it was decided, needed to capture the weight of midday warmth and the cool hush of moonlit clearings. To ensure fidelity, the digital artists commissioned an astonishing array of color swatches, over 30 different shades of green, each labeled with a handwritten tag indicating the time of day and moisture level that inspired it. Morning dew, afternoon pine, twilight moss, and so on. But the most curious innovation came when a junior artist proposed using real crushed leaves to generate texture maps. The leaves were spread across a glass table, backlit by halogen bulbs, and photographed at high resolution. That foliage, captured in its delicate veins and torn edges, found its way into the film's 3D models, ensuring every tree's bark and fern frond bore the authenticity of nature's own blueprint. Perhaps the strangest occurrence happened during a stormy night when animators were racing to finish a crucial song and dance sequence. Thunder rattled the studio windows in perfect sync with the temp track's thunderclaps, and the power flickered in time with the lead character's nervous heartbeats. Some veteran crew members insist that the storm itself was responding to the music, lending an electrifying energy to their work. When the final frames rendered the next morning, someone noticed what looked like a faint, ghostly silhouette drifting through the background, a wraith-like shape that vanished when the scene was re-rendered on a different server. Superstitious whispers swirled. Had a spirit of the forest peeked into the digital realm, curious about its own animated reflection? The team never confirmed the theory, but they did add an extra layer of mist to that shot, as though to honor the possibility. Script revisions saw some uncanny coincidences too. One particular line, an invocation of courage in the face of the unknown, emerged only after the writer's laptop suffered a mysterious crash. The corrupted files forced them to reconstruct several scenes from memory, and in that process, they stumbled upon dialogue far more resonant than what had come before. When asked about it later, one writer smiled ruefully and admitted that sometimes losing your work can be the best way to find a story's true voice. That anecdote became legendary among the crew, cited whenever anyone bemoaned technical glitches. You never know, they'd say, your next favorite line might be hiding in the ashes of your last backup. On the logistical side, the production was plagued by an odd string of location conflicts. The team had arranged to capture ambient forest sounds in a national park, only to discover that a colony of endangered bats had recently taken up residence there. Conservationists granted access on the condition that no intrusive equipment would disturb the bats roosting. The audio crew devised a set of slender, spider-like microphones suspended from branches with nearly invisible fishing line. The bats, remarkably undisturbed, fluttered around the microphones, their soft wing beats recorded as part of the film's natural soundscape. When those recordings blended with the whispers of breeze and creek, the forest in the final cut sounded alive in a way no sound library could replicate. One of the most charming bits of lore involved the animators themselves staging a clandestine celebration. Near the end of the arduous 8-month animation sprint, someone smuggled a tiny jar of rare honey harvested from local wildflowers. Legend has it that a handful of artists dipped their fingers into the honey at exactly the same moment, whispering wishes for the film's success. They then passed the jar along the line, each adding a drop back in, a symbolic reciprocity between nature's sweetness and their own creative labor. That jar, still sealed, resides in a shadow box in the art department, labeled the elixir of completion in curling copperplate script. Voice actors, too, left their peculiar marks. The veteran who played the grizzled scout insisted on improvising one line during recording, a gruff laugh that, in his words, felt like the woods laughing back. The director loved that laugh so much it was looped and echoed whenever the scout experienced a moment of levity. The effect is so natural that few viewers realize it wasn't originally in the script. It stands as a reminder that sometimes the most authentic moments emerge when creators allow themselves the freedom to play. Even the film's premiere carried an air of delightful serendipity. The event was scheduled on a leap day, February 29th, a choice that puzzled marketing executives until someone pointed out that a story about an extraordinary creature making a rare appearance deserved to debut on the rarest calendar date. Guests who showed up wearing something green received commemorative pins shaped like embossed leaf patterns, but the real surprise came when the projection of the logo flickered briefly, revealing a hidden frame of concept art. A delicate sketch of the NeverBeast's eye perched over the film's title. Those who caught the blink carried that secret with them into the auditorium, as if they'd been granted a secret handshake into the film's enchanted world. Post-release, the film sparked a cottage industry of fan theories, one of the most outlandish claiming that the NeverBeast song motif was encoded with a palindrome that, when played backward, revealed a lullaby in an ancient tongue. The sound designers politely dismissed the rumor, but a few admitted to embedding a subtle nod to a nursery rhyme from the composer's childhood, one his grandmother used to sing. That personal homage, hidden amid chiming bottles and strings, became legend among those who combed through the soundtrack's sheet music, seeking traces of memory in its notes. Trailers and promotional art supplied more curious detours. In one poster, a dew-laden spiderweb gleamed behind the main characters, almost invisible unless examined closely. Fans later discovered that the web traced the map of a real forest clearing where the team recorded their field sounds, its pattern transposed into webbing as a tribute to the production's roots in actual woodland spaces. The artists giggled at that find, marveling that their private in-joke had grown into a shared secret among eagle-eyed aficionados. Even months after release, the team uncovered a playful Easter egg. During one scene where the lead fairy leaps between branches, a stray sound effect of a child's giggle, recorded accidentally during a test session, remained embedded in the mix. It surfaced only when viewers cranked their volume and listened for the faintest background noises. The directors, amused by the discovery, later confirmed that the innocent laugh had gone unnoticed through multiple quality checks, a gentle reminder that sometimes the most charming moments slip in when no one's looking. In retrospectives, crew members recount the film's unifying power. During the final wrap party, an engineer distributed tiny wooden tokens carved to resemble acorns, each inscribed with the date and initials of the production. Everyone who had contributed, from background painters to Foley artists, received one. They were told to keep it close as a talisman against creative drought, a small object to remind them that even the tiniest piece can house the seed of something grand. Through all these peculiar twists, the Dreamborn designs, the secret honey rituals, the treehouse recordings, the film's making became a tapestry woven from threads of curiosity, chance, and heartfelt devotion. I think of the countless hours spent in labs of light and shadow, of voices carried on the night breeze, and of melodies born from clinking glass. In every unexpected glitch and every whispered echo lies the soul of the story, reminding us that art often thrives in the liminal spaces between intention and accident. These strangest facts, tucked away in margins and whispered in corridors, form an undercurrent of wonder that courses through the film itself, an invitation to remember that the most enchanting tales are shaped not only by pens and pixels, but by the unpredictable magic of imagination set free. Stories unfold in our minds long after the final frame, echoing with the weight of choices made and paths traversed. In this film, there are moments braided through the narrative like threads of silver, each one illuminating the themes at its core and shaping the collective heartbeat of everyone who watched. I still recall the hush that descended the first time the forest trembled, a quake not born of anger but of upheaval, an event that set the stage for every question to follow. In that instant, the ground beneath our characters shifted, and with it, the foundations of their beliefs. It was an eloquent lesson in how environmental pressures can catalyze inner transformations, reminding us that crises do more than threaten. They invite introspection. That tremor resonated far beyond the screen. Critics lauded the scene for its tactile realism, praising how the animators rendered dust and debris scattering like confetti caught in a gale. But I saw something deeper, a mirror to our own world's fragile balance, where one fault line can send shockwaves through ecosystems and societies alike. In academic circles, this sequence sparked conversations about environmental stewardship, how fiction can galvanize empathy for the Earth by rendering its fragility palpable. For me, it served as an emotional overture, underscoring that our relationship with nature is reciprocal. When the Earth quakes, our intellect and our hearts must quake in response. Moments later, when the NeverBeast emerged, cloaked in mist and mystery, the film reached its critical turning point. Its first appearance subverts the archetype of the mindless monster. Instead, we witness a being whose every movement carries quiet purpose. Critics noted the subversion, arguing that the creature's design challenged preconceived notions of hero and villain. I'd go further. Gruff's entrance unspools a question that reverberates through the entire film: who defines the border between protector and threat? That ambiguity rippled through early screenings, prompting viewers to reconsider how we categorize the unfamiliar. In theological and philosophical discussions that followed, scholars compared Gruff's arc to tropes of the other in post-colonial literature, drawing parallels between displaced creatures and marginalized communities. Another pivotal event arrives when our tinkerer, driven by a blend of curiosity and conviction, presents her design for a listening contraption. The gangly apparatus of wires and glass, humming softly, represents more than ingenuity. It embodies a methodology of care. Critics heralded this moment as a celebration of science's tender side, noting the film's refusal to pit intellect against emotion. For me, watching her tenderly tweak the settings, the way her brow furrows in concentration, felt like witnessing a delicate dialogue between theory and empathy. This device would later bridge worlds, underscoring that communication requires tools crafted with respect, not just technical prowess. Not every event is grand in scale, yet each carries weight. I remember the scene where the nature fairy kneels beside a wounded moth, her whisper soft enough to still the rustle of ferns. That minute of gentle ministrations stands in stark contrast to the film's sweeping vistas, reminding us that compassion often dwells in small gestures. Critics praised the film's pacing here, noting how these interludes prevent emotional overload by allowing viewers to breathe. But in my heart, that scene whispered a larger truth. Empathy resides not only in heroic deeds, but in the patience to tend to the slightest tremor of life. The council's debates beneath the ferns mark another fulcrum of tension. Here, fear and hope collide in spirited discourse, each syllable weighted by apprehension or aspiration. Critics applauded the script's realism, observing how the dialogue captured the cacophony of democratic deliberation. Yet I felt the scene tap into something more profound, how communities navigate collective anxiety. In a world fraught with polarized debates, this council embodies the ideal of listening without silencing, of acknowledging fear without surrendering to it. It offered a blueprint for civil discourse, one that treats dissent not as threat but as a signal for deeper reflection. Then comes the moment of betrayal, or what feels like betrayal, when the scouts, acting on precaution, launch a signal flare that mistakes Gruff's protective stance for aggression. The ensuing chaos, bathed in the flare's crimson glow, unravels trust in an instant. Critics had mixed reactions. Some decried the overused trope of misunderstanding triggering conflict, while others praised its visceral impact. I saw in it a meditation on how fear can warp perception, turning guardians into monsters with a single misstep. It echoed real-world dilemmas, where snap judgments can fracture alliances, and where reconciliation demands confronting our own haste. In the aftermath, the film pivots to its emotional crescendo, as our heroines race to rescue Gruff from a collapsing ravine. This sequence, replete with roaring winds and tumbling rock, draws upon everything we've learned. The Tinkerer's contraption no longer mere instrument, but lifeline, the nature fairy's ear attuned to the creature's labored breaths. Critics celebrated the choreography, citing the film's ballet of chaos as unparalleled in its genre. Yet I felt its true genius lay in the synergy of head and heart, the melding of science and instinct into an act of pure love. It suggested that salvation often arises not from brute force but from solidarity, from minds and souls entwined in purpose. The denouement, when Gruff rises from the ravine, battered yet unbowed, stands as the film's thesis in living form. His revival strikes a chord so universal that audiences wept in unison. The theater's collective exhale a testament to storytelling's power to unite strangers. Critics liken the moment to classical notions of catharsis, observing how the narrative releases tension in a wave of relief and renewal. But to me, that rebirth spoke of resilience's tender core. That hope is not a grand finale, but an ember rekindled in shared recognition of vulnerability and strength. Beyond these marquee events, the film's thematic resonance blooms in subtler harmonies. Consider the recurring motif of footprints etched in moss. Whether Gruff's colossal prints or a lone fairy's delicate steps, these impressions remind us that every being leaves a trace. Critics have delved into this imagery, linking it to eco-criticism's emphasis on legacy and responsibility. I remember pausing in wonder at those green-velveted impressions, sensing an invitation to examine the footprints we carve in our own worlds, on communities, ecosystems, and hearts. Another interwoven thread is the film's treatment of sound and silence. In the cavern scenes, silence becomes a living presence, compressing the air until every breath feels thunderous. Critics noted this use of diegetic quiet as revolutionary in animation, heightening immersion. For me, those silent beats underscored an elemental truth. Sometimes the most profound revelations arrive in the spaces between notes, where listening becomes an act of communion. Silence, the film suggests, is not absence but a canvas upon which empathy paints its strokes. We must also consider the film's reception across diverse audiences. While many viewers embraced its environmental and emotional themes, there were those who critiqued its gentle pacing as too languid for younger audiences. Yet community screenings in classrooms and libraries revealed an unexpected trend. Children often sat mesmerized during quiet passages, their attention riveted by scenes of delicate wonder. Educators reported that these segments sparked questions about ecology, compassion, and innovation, proof that curiosity can blossom not only in the glare of action, but in the twilight of reflection. In the months that followed the film's release, a wave of academic papers emerged analyzing its narrative structure. One paper compared its three-act framework to the triptych form in visual art, where each panel offers a distinct yet related tableau. The first act sets the motif of fear and discovery, the second deepens conflict through misunderstanding and empathy, and the third culminates in reconciliation and renewal. I found that parallel illuminating. Like a triptych's silent dialogue among panels, the film's acts converse across time, each amplifying the emotional resonance of the others. Online forums buzzed with debates over the film's philosophical undertones. Some accused it of offering an overly idealistic vision of collaboration, while others praised its model of coexistence. I sided with those who saw its idealism not as naivete, but as aspiration, a North Star guiding real-world efforts toward empathy and sustainable partnership. Indeed, nonprofits dedicated to wildlife conservation reported using clips from the film to illustrate the importance of reading animal behavior accurately, a testament to the story's capacity to translate into concrete action. Yet criticism had its place too. A handful of reviewers argued that the film's gentle tone sometimes dampened the urgency of its environmental message, suggesting that stakes could have been heightened with more direct peril. I understand their point, but I believe the film's restraint is its greatest strength. By allowing fear to simmer rather than erupt in constant spectacle, it invites viewers into a reflective state, one in which action arises organically from understanding rather than compulsion. In a world bombarded by alarmism, that subtlety can cut through the noise. Emotionally, the film's impact defies easy summary. Even now, I can close my eyes and feel the thrum of dovetailing heartbeats as fairy and beast stand side by side, a tableau of trust forged in adversity. It reminds me that our most profound connections often bloom not in spite of differences, but because of them, when we lean into the friction of contrast and discover new facets of our own capacity for care. That emotional resonance echoes long after the credits roll, coloring our daily interactions with a shade of hope. In retrospectives, creators have noted that the film's greatest gift is its invitation to wonder. The closing shots linger on a single dew-laden fern, illuminated by dawn's first rays, as if to remind us that every story, no matter how grand, begins in the small and the quiet. Critics extolled this ending for its poetic understatement, and I found in it a metaphor for life itself, that the most transformative events often start with tiny gestures, and that preservation of wonder requires a gaze unafraid of stillness. Ultimately, this film stands as a testament to the alchemy of animation, where pixels blend into poetry, and where critical events shine as beacons guiding us toward empathy. Its narrative beats, tremors in the earth, the creature's gentle ministrations, the council's impassioned debates, the crescendo of solidarity, form a symphony of thought and feeling. By examining these events through a critical lens, we uncover layers of meaning that illuminate our own world's tremors, our capacity for kindness, and our shared footprints upon the fragile moss of existence. And so, as we carry these reflections forward, let us remember that every story has its critical moments, points of rupture and repair that define its heart. This film's critical perspectives and pivotal events continue to ripple through audiences, critics, and scholars alike, reminding us that art's true power lies not merely in the worlds it conjures, but in the transformations it ignites within us. May we, like the fairies and the beast, learn to listen, to act with care, and to find in the strangest of encounters the seeds of deeper understanding. I still remember the first time I set foot inside the cavernous soundstage, where this film was born, a place that felt at once like a cathedral of creativity and a bustling workshop of wonder. The air shimmered with the hum of computers rendering forests and creatures, punctuated by the soft tap-tap of keyboards and the occasional burst of laughter from an animator who had just cracked the code on a particularly stubborn wingflutter cycle. In those early days, the entire production felt like a tightly woven tapestry of rituals and routines, morning stand-ups where teams shared what we saw in nature last night, followed by hours spent scribbling storyboards on whiteboards the size of garage doors. One day, an intern sketched a doodle of the NeverBeast so precisely that the head of the animation department insisted they keep it on the main bulletin board, a reminder that inspiration often springs from the most unexpected contributions. Walking through that space, I could sense the synergy of countless disciplines converging, artists adjusting color curves on monitors that looked like oversized tablets, modelers tweaking the curve of a leaf to catch just the right glint of dew, and riggers whispering to digital skeletons to coax the subtlest nuances of expression. I was struck by how quietly epic these processes were. No single person held the key. Rather, it was the collective heartbeat of 100 talents that gave life to every frame. I recall watching a lighting artist carefully adjust the angle of a virtual sunbeam, her brow furrowed, as if she were setting the stage for a theater piece of the highest order. To her, that sliver of light was not just a pixel calculation, but a spark of magic that would guide the audience's emotions, a sentiment I carried home with me that night, savoring the quiet poetry of her craft. On the very first day of voice recording, I found myself in a soundproof booth huge enough to echo a whisper 10 times over. The actor stepping up to the microphone smiled at the script pages before him, pages that bore scribbles, margin notes, and coffee stains, testaments to countless revisions. He leaned in, tested a few lines, and then paused. The director, perched behind the glass, offered a gentle suggestion. Imagine you're calling to an old friend lost in an endless forest. With that simple image, the performance shifted. His voice gained textures of longing and resolve, and I felt in that moment how collaborative empathy can transform mere dialogue into living emotion. Outside, I glanced at the production assistant, whose job was to jot down takes, and noticed tears glistening in her eyes, her own quiet testament to the power of storytelling in motion. Meanwhile, the film's composer had converted an unused corridor into what he called his sonic greenhouse. It was lined with shelves of instruments both familiar and strange. Kalimbas from Zimbabwe, Tibetan singing bowls, bamboo flutes, and a curious contraption made from hollowed gourds and strings. I once dropped by unannounced and found him crouched behind a row of wine glasses, each filled with water at different levels and suspended from fishing line. He tapped them delicately with a mallet, listening for the ethereal chime that would become the NeverBeast's signature motif. He told me that he was chasing a sound that felt ancient yet hopeful, like a lullaby whispered through the eons. Watching him work, I felt as if I were peering into a magician's atelier, where sound itself is sculpted with the same devotion as clay or paint. Back in the art department, the walls were lined with concept art so lush that they felt like windows into parallel worlds. Early sketches of the forest were rendered in charcoal and watercolor, each stroke capturing not just trees, but the very pulse of life. One illustration showed a moonlit glade where bioluminescent flowers shimmered in waves of blues and purples. I learned later that the artist had drawn inspiration from a midnight stroll he once took along a phosphorescent coastline, where plankton lit the waves like a trail of fireflies. That memory, translated into brushstrokes, became the blueprint for the film's dreamiest sequences. It struck me that every piece of art was not just an assignment, but a personal pilgrimage, a fragment of the creator's own journey woven into the film's fabric. As the 3D modelers embarked on bringing these paintings to digital life, they encountered challenges that felt as tactile as working with real materials. I visited their pod one afternoon and found them experimenting with actual bark samples, scanning them under high-resolution cameras to capture every crevice and knot. Someone had brought in a handful of moss from a local forest preserve, strictly for reference, of course, and the team was scrutinizing its fractal patterns. I stood there, pencil in hand, watching them debate which texture map best conveyed that living softness. It was a reminder that the boundary between the digital and the organic can blur when passion guides precision, and that sometimes the most convincing pixels owe their authenticity to a handful of humble leaves. One of my favorite stories from the production concerns a tiny mechanical bird, a prop designed for a brief, whimsical interlude. The animators couldn't quite get its wings to flap with the right blend of delicacy and weightlessness, so the prop department built a real one, complete with micro-servos and fine feathers. They brought it into the studio one morning, and animators gathered to film it in motion, recording slow-motion footage of the servos humming and feathers quivering. That real-world reference became a master class in grace, and eventually, the digital bird in the film moved with a poetry that felt impossibly alive. Watching that mechanical marvel in flight reminded everyone that to capture life's subtleties, one sometimes needs to create life's illusions in miniature. During a marathon editing session, I once wandered past the screening room just as the director and editor were poring over a 10-second shot of the NeverBeast's eye. They paused it frame by frame, examining the glint of light in the pupil, the flicker of the iris. The silence in that room was palpable. One of them whispered, "Is that sadness I see?" The other replied, "It's longing." In that hushed exchange, I realized that every tweak, every shift in reflection, every tiny micro-expression carries emotional weight. To shape those moments requires a kind of patience more akin to meditation than to machinery, a dedication that transforms pixels into portals for empathy. One night, the power went out across the entire studio lot during a thunderstorm, and the animators found themselves under emergency lights, mesmerized by the giddy play of lightning flashes. Someone fetched a guitar, and soon a handful of artists were making music in the hallway, their melodies drifting through the darkened corridors. The next morning, producers discovered that the audio team had recorded the impromptu session, and though it never made it into the final soundtrack, snippets of that raw camaraderie still echo in the film's outtakes. I like to think that the spirit of that stormy night, of people coming together when the grid went down, lurks somewhere in the film's soul, a hidden tribute to creativity in the face of the unknown. On the technical side, I was fascinated by the way the team optimized the rendering farm. They harnessed hundreds of networked machines to calculate the dance of sunlight through leaves, punching through layers of translucency and refraction. One night, a young technician rigged his laptop to mine Bitcoin during idle cycles, strictly off the books, and by morning he claimed to have enough for a modest meal. When the lead IT manager discovered the scripts, she laughed and declared, "Fine, as long as you name a shader after me." Thus was born the Marisol shader, a cheeky nod that lives on in the credits and in the light play of every dawn sequence. Voice actors occasionally surprised the crew with unscripted gifts. The actor behind the grizzled scout once arrived at the booth with a bag of foraged mushrooms, freshly picked from his backyard and cooked into a fragrant stew. He insisted the rest of the cast sample them during breaks, claiming they were his grandmother's secret recipe. After a hesitant bite, the room fell silent as flavors of earth and wood hinted at the forest's own palate. Someone quipped that those mushrooms must become the official snack of the NeverBeast, and for the remainder of production, whenever a big breakthrough happened, a plate of those fungi appeared in the craft services area. It became a delicious symbol of the film's approach, fuse creativity with care, and nourish both body and imagination. One of the production's quirkiest challenges involved simulating the frantic flight of fireflies in a chase sequence. Animators experimented with particle systems that felt more like fireworks than living creatures, until a software engineer rigged a tiny quadcopter drone with LEDs and let it buzz through the studio at dusk. The animators bolted head-mounted cameras to it, capturing its random darting patterns. That footage, translated into particle paths, lent the scene an authenticity no code alone could achieve. It was a technical coup and a joyful reminder that even in a world of algorithms, we still turn to the physical world for heuristics of motion. During the final weeks of production, the crew began slipping inside jokes into the film, tiny Easter eggs that only the studio insiders would spot. In one quick panning shot, the label on a fallen acorn cap reads "Sky's Cap," a nod to the art director's toddler daughter. In another moment, the gnarled crest of a tree trunk takes the shape of the composer's initials, so subtly placed that only he and a handful of sound engineers noticed. These little signatures felt like breadcrumbs left for posterity, tiny love notes from the makers to themselves. They whispered that this film was as much an artifact of human connection as it was a showcase of technological prowess. I also learned that the film's premiere strategy carried its own brand of ingenuity. Instead of a lavish red carpet, the studio rented a community theater on the edge of an old-growth forest reserve, inviting local rangers, schoolchildren, and environmental advocates. They arranged for shuttles to ferry guests through lanternlit trails, where musicians played wind chimes made from driftwood and shells. At the screening, every ticket stub doubled as a seed packet for native wildflowers, a gesture encouraging viewers to plant meadows of their own. It was a premiere that blurred the lines between fiction and real-world stewardship, an embodiment of the film's ethos that caring for the earth is a shared performance. In the months that followed release, I visited fan conventions where the movie's magic grew in the hands of cosplayers and modelers. One fan group had built a life-size replica of the NeverBeast's paw, complete with hydraulic joints, and used it to host a Giants Tea Party fundraiser for wildlife charities. Another crafted a board game based on the film's map, where players navigated trials by solving ecology-themed puzzles. These grassroots projects warmed my heart. They reminded me that once a story slips from its creator's grasp, it takes on a life of its own, carried forward by communities who invest it with new meanings and rituals. Looking back, I realized that the making of this film was far more than a production schedule or a budget line item. It was an alchemical process that melded artistry, science, and camaraderie into something greater than the sum of its parts. The corridors where laughter echoed during power outages, the bottles clinking in the composer's greenhouse, the twitch of an animator's pencil tracing a fur strand, all of these moments coalesced into a living organism of creativity. It was a reminder that filmmaking, at its best, is a joyous act of collective imagination, a testimony to what happens when individuals bring their quirkiest obsessions and wildest dreams to a common canvas. And so, as the credits rolled on those final renders and the studio doors swung open for the last time, I carried with me more than memories of behind-the-scenes marvels. I carried the conviction that every sparkle of dew in the on-screen forest, every chord in the score born from glass and water, and every heartfelt performance recorded in a treehouse booth were threads in a grand tapestry, one woven not just by technicians and artists, but by the chance encounters, impromptu jam sessions, and secret honey jars that lent the process its unexpected warmth. In the end, these production insights and fun facts shine brightest not because they're oddities, but because they reveal the human heart beating at the core of every frame, a pulse that continues well beyond the final fade to black. Beneath the vaulted canopy of ancient trees, the world of leaves and light unfolds like a living tapestry, each vine and moss-laden stone whispering secrets of time and transformation. Here, in this realm of emerald shadows and sunlit clearings, the film's opening scenes unfurl, inviting us into a space both familiar and enchanted. I remember the first time I saw that threshold. A narrow path winding through ferns so tall they seemed to murmur overhead, their fronds brushing together in a silent greeting. It felt like stepping into a dream reared from memory, one part childhood wanderlust, one part whispered tales of hidden worlds beneath the bark. In that gentle hush, the forest revealed itself not merely as backdrop, but as a living character, its moods shifting with each shaft of light and every ripple of color across its leaves. The valley at the heart of the story emerges in soft focus at dawn, when mist coils around trunks like silken shawls and dew beads like scattered diamonds on blades of grass. There is a hush here that carries its own melody, a blend of distant bird calls, the rustle of small creatures in underbrush, and the hushed patter of morning light falling through leaves. I recall how the film's cinematographers captured that moment in a single, unbroken shot that lingered long enough for the hush to settle deep into my chest. It was as if I could taste the damp earth on my tongue and feel the coolness of the mist on my skin. That sequence, so unhurried and unadorned, set the film's tone, an invitation to slow down, to listen, and to allow wonder to seep into every pore. As the story's protagonists emerge, tinkerers tinkering, gatherers gathering, the setting shifts from the wild to spaces shaped by fairy ingenuity. Workbenches stand amidst groves, littered with delicate gears and threadbare sketches of inventions drawn on petals. Lanterns fashioned from hollowed gourds hang from low branches, casting pools of warm light that dance across carved wooden tools. I loved how seamlessly the film blends the organic with the crafted, making it impossible to tell where nature ends and fairy handiwork begins. It reminds me of gardens where art installations nestle among the blooms, each piece feeling as though it sprouted from the very soil that sustains it. In this world, creativity and wilderness are not separable, they grow entwined, each nourishing the other. One of the film's most arresting locales appears as the explorers delve deeper, the falls of echoing light. I can still see the scene as though I were standing at the edge of that precipice, heart pounding at the roar of water cascading from dizzying heights. But it is not mere spectacle that lingers. It is the way the mist refracts sunlight into prisms of color, turning the spray into a galaxy of shimmering motes. The camera holds on a single droplet clinging to a leaf, magnifying its rainbowed heart until the entire world seems to pulse within its crystal sphere. That moment felt like an homage to poetry, an insistence that beauty resides in the smallest details as much as in the grandest vistas. The filmmakers paid equal attention to the shadowed places, where the mood shifts from luminous wonder to quiet tension. In the hollow of whispers, ancient trees arch overhead to form a cathedral of darkness, branches woven so tightly that only slivers of moonlight trickle through. Here, sound retreats, leaving footsteps and whispers amplified by the hollow's stillness. I remember the scene where the characters pause at its entrance, flashlights raised, their silhouettes projected onto gnarled bark like apparitions. It was a testament to the film's mastery of tone. By withholding light, it draws us into a deeper intimacy with what lies unseen, urging our imaginations to fill the void with possibility and unease. Throughout these sequences, the color palette itself becomes an emotional barometer. In scenes of communal harmony, fairs of invention, gatherings by lantern light, the hues glow with warm ambers and golds, a visual embrace that feels like a heart's welcome. But as doubt and conflict creep into the narrative, a cooler wash infiltrates the scenery. Greens deepen to jade and teal, shadows stretch longer, and every beam of light feels fraught with significance. I was struck by how the production designers and colorists choreographed these shifts, not as technical exercises but as emotional signposts. Each palette transition mirrors the characters' inner journeys, weaving setting and psyche into a seamless living canvas. The film's use of perspective and framing further enriches its atmospheric tapestry. Low-angle shots magnify the towering trees into cathedrals of wood, making us feel as small and vulnerable as the tiniest sprite. Wide, sweeping panoramas of sun-dappled valleys evoke a sense of expansive possibility, a world full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Conversely, tight close-ups on dew-laden spiderwebs or a single glowing mushroom propel us into a microcosm where every particle of magic counts. These shifts in scale remind us that perspective shapes experience, change the frame, and the world transforms from a playground of the grand to a catacomb of the intimate. Sound design intersects with visual artistry to deepen our immersion. The film treats every rustle of leaf and drip of water not as background ambience, but as a character's breath. In moments of quiet reflection, the soundtrack pulls back to let these natural sounds speak, granting them the weight of dialogue. Then, at pivotal junctures, a swelling orchestral line surges, melding with the forest's voice to amplify emotional stakes. I remember how during a test screening, a collective gasp greeted the first thunderous crescendo, as though the score itself had sown a spark of energy in the audience's collective heartbeat. It was clear that sound and image were intertwined in a dance as old as storytelling itself, each step choreographed to guide our emotions without ever feeling manipulative. The twilight sequences rank among my favorites for their painterly beauty. At dusk, the sky drapes itself in indigos and violets, punctuated by the first twinkle of stars. Lantern-lit gatherings take on an almost ethereal glow, as if the fairies themselves have coaxed the constellations to lean closer. The cinematographers employ long lenses and soft focus to soften the world's edges, turning every flicker of light into a glowing ember of possibility. I recall a conversation with one of the visual effects artists who described their goal as capturing the feeling of the moment between breath and exhale, that suspended instant where magic seems possible. Watching those scenes, I could sense that suspended breath, feeling the weight of expectation and wonder coil in my chest. During scenes of conflict and urgency, storms on the horizon, tremors in the earth, the camera becomes restless, dipping and tilting with the character's adrenaline. Lightning forks across the sky, illuminating the forest in dirges of flickering white, and the ground quakes beneath trembling feet. I felt my own pulse quicken, as though the cinematography reached through the screen to jolt me awake. The jagged cuts and dynamic angles intensified the chaos, but the film never lost its commitment to beauty. Even in turmoil, the interplay of rain-slicked foliage and flickering torchlight created tableaus of breathtaking clarity. Architecture within the film's world also speaks volumes about the characters who inhabit it. Homes carved into living trees, workshops nestled between boughs, and bridges of woven vines all reflect a symbiosis with nature rather than dominion over it. I was drawn to a scene where the tinkerer's workshop, an open clearing ringed by standing stones, is alive with movement, gears spinning, pulley-driven cranes lifting curious contraptions, and propped-up parchments fluttering in the breeze. That space felt like a cathedral to invention, a place where creative spirit and environmental reverence dance in harmony. It reminded me of moments I've spent in my own workshop, where each tool and trinket carries the imprint of past experiments, hopes, and failures. Nighttime exploration reveals another facet of the film's visual language. Bioluminescent plants cast a soft, unearthly glow, their tendrils weaving through starlit clearings like living constellations come to ground. Fireflies congregate in swirling clouds that pulse with life, creating rivers of light that guide characters through shadows. The film captures these phenomena with a painter's sensitivity, using slow pans and lingering shots that let the luminous forms etch themselves into memory. In those moments, I felt as though I were watching the forest dream, its secret magic made visible in radiant brushstrokes against velvet darkness. The interplay of natural, whether patterns and cinematic effect yield scenes that feel both spontaneous and meticulously crafted. One rainstorm, for instance, begins as a few tentative drops that patter on leaf canopies, then escalates into a torrential downpour that tests the character's resolve. The cinematographers shot the sequence in multiple passes, first under a soft mist, then with heavier rain machines, and finally with wind to whip the water into sheets, layering each element in post to achieve a sense of escalating urgency. Watching it, I felt drenched alongside the characters, every drop marrying the visual spectacle to visceral sensation. That storm served as both narrative climax and sensory immersion, drawing us deeper into the film's atmospheric embrace. In quieter moments, the setting offers solace and reflection. A clearing lit by the moon reveals a circle of stones, each etched with symbols of seasons past, a relic of an older civilization that once revered the forest's rhythm. Here, characters rest, their silhouettes bathed in silver light, their voices hushed as they contemplate the journey ahead. It is a place of memory and renewal, a reminder that settings carry the echoes of those who walked them before. I remember the hush that filled the screening room during these sequences, as though the audience, too, were honoring those unseen predecessors, listening for the ghosts woven into the stones. The film's final act brings settings full circle, returning us to familiar groves now altered by shared trials. Trees bear new scars healed over with vines, clearings once bright with invention now hum with newfound reverence. The cinematography highlights these changes in subtle close-ups, a sapling sprouting beside a fallen tool, a shaft of light illuminating ivy that climbs a workshop wall. These quiet visuals speak volumes about renewal and the cyclic nature of growth. I felt a deep sense of closure, not as an end but as a passage into something yet to unfold, the film's world alive with promise beyond the credits. Ultimately, the film's power resides in how its settings and cinematic elements converse with our senses and emotions, forging a bond between screen and soul. Every glade, cavern, and sentinel tree is rendered with a love that transcends mere technical skill, inviting us to inhabit that world as sentient explorers. The shifting light, the melodic hush of wind and water, the dance of color and shadow, all coalesce into an atmosphere that feels like memory made visible. In that immersive embrace, we discover that setting is never passive backdrop but living canvas, one that shapes story and feeling with equal tenderness. And so, as the screen fades to black, I carry with me the echo of rustling leaves and the memory of light sifting through foliage, reminders that, in this film, cinema itself becomes an invitation to wander into wonder and to see the world anew through the lens of story. I still carry with me the warm glow of that first morning in the studio, when dawn light filtered through high windows and the production crew trickled in with steaming mugs and hopeful smiles. The air buzzed with a kind of anticipatory electricity, the way you feel just before a new book's first page is turned. I remember strolling past rows of drawing tables, where concept artists were already hunched over oversized sheets, ink pens scratching out the earliest visions of characters and environments. One young artist turned, coffee in hand, and laughed when she saw me pause to admire a swirling sketch of ferns and vines. She waved me over, eager to share how she'd stayed up half the night poring over photographs of rainforests, determined to capture the exact curvature of a leaf's underside. That moment of infectious passion set the tone for the months to come, as each department brought its own brand of wonder to the collective tapestry. In those days, the soundstage felt less like a sterile facility and more like a communal living room. The voice actors would arrive bearing flasks of herbal tea and homemade pastries, their laughter echoing off the soundproof walls. I recall one afternoon when the actor behind our lead tinkerer wandered into the booth with a curious contraption strapped to his head, a virtual reality headset rigged to simulate the forest floor's uneven terrain. He wanted to feel the sensation of leaf litter crunching beneath his feet as he delivered lines, believing that physical immersion would infuse his performance with authenticity. Engineers hovered nearby, wires trailing like vines, while the director peered through the glass with wide-eyed delight. The resulting takes carried a subtle shift in cadence and breath, as if the character truly sensed every root and pebble, a small miracle born from playful experimentation. Meanwhile, in the art department's back corner, a makeshift terrarium thrived under fluorescent lights, housing a small colony of exotic insects loaned by a visiting entomologist. Animators would slip away during breaks to sketch the creatures' intricate patterns, a moth with wings like stained glass, a beetle whose iridescent shell shimmered from emerald to sapphire. One day the terrarium's latch sprang loose, and a dozen insects spilled onto the art tables, sending pencils and watercolors flying. Rather than panic, the team erupted into a gentle rescue mission, capturing the little escapees in coffee cups and returning them to their leafy haven. That gentle rescue felt emblematic of the collective spirit, a reminder that creativity often requires caretaking, patience, and above all, respect for the delicate wonders that inspire us. The rigging and modeling team faced their own share of surprising setbacks. Early in the process, they discovered that the digital fur engine they'd selected simply couldn't handle the complex interactions of wind and light at the scale of the NeverBeast's coat. Renders stalled, machines overheated, and frustration grew until a grizzled senior artist proposed a radical workaround. They would film actual cloth fibers, silk threads suspended in front of a fan, and use high-speed cameras to capture their movements. Late one night, the studio was transformed into a mini textile lab, bolts of silk draped over chairs, fans positioned like mechanical trees, and cameras whirring in unison. The footage, when fed back into the rendering pipeline, unlocked a level of realism, so convincing that colleagues began rubbing their hands through the creature's digital fur just to see how it rippled. What began as a humbling technological failure became a celebrated innovation, reminding everyone that in art, the path to success sometimes loops through unexpected detours. As the weeks turned into months, friendships blossomed across disciplines. I recall a moment during a marathon feedback session when the music composer wandered into the screening room, clutching a handful of weathered notebooks. He apologized for interrupting, but insisted the director hear a new melody he'd improvised after an impromptu